Anya Parampil and I were in attendance at the Warner Theater in Washington, D.C. on May 23rd, where USAID Director Samantha Power rolled out the Diia app before hundreds of awestruck spectators alongside Ukraine's Minister of Digital Transformation, Mikhailo Fedorov, hosted by tech journalist Kara Swisher and featuring the executive chairman of Visa and the head of the Eurasia Foundation. This app, known as Diia, D-I-I-A, has been promoted by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as a state within a smartphone. And it supposedly provides something like 18 fundamental government services and along with 120 other functions. And here I asked Oksana Markarova, the Ukrainian ambassador to the US, about whether this whole event was designed to actually use the ravages of Ukraine and the Ukrainian proxy war to advance to accelerate the fourth industrial revolution and this dystopian digital prison that is coming into effect with digital IDs, digital passports, and a total panopticon style surveillance. So watch this exchange.
As we're waiting for it, I'm sure remembering I saw Samantha Power in person a year ago in Brooklyn, and I froze up, and I was trying to think of a question, but then she got into a car and she went away. So anyway,
sorry, we'll fix that in post. I actually forgot to share that clip, so here's the interview. This event was about profiting off of war, turning Ukraine into a laboratory, the ruins of Ukraine into a laboratory for the fourth industrial revolution.
You're absolutely
getting Ukrainians all in a digital.
You're not interested in the answer?
Please. And can you tell me why my colleague Anya Parampil is on the kill list maintained by your government? Your Interior Ministry maintains a kill list of journalists, and my partner here, Anya Parampil, is on it.
Unlike in Ukraine, you can't kill and ban your opposition here.
Yeah.
Our Nazis actually have to hide behind the government, not serve in the government.
That was cold. Actually, at one point I wanted to, I didn't, this guy is the head of, I figured out who he was. He's the head of something called Digital Democracy that State Department backs. But if you look right here, maybe it's a little before, we can see this guy right here. I totally missed him. That's Alexander Vindman.
Oh, there's Vindman.
I wish I had known he was there. But you know, that's a pretty
or someone who looks like Vindman. Yeah, no, that is him for sure. Yeah,
that's Vindman.
Yeah, it's Vindman.
Stand, everybody stand for Vindman. Remember when Biden did that at the in the debates? Like, who the hell is Vindman?
Yeah.
So Anya, what did you make of this event and that exchange? Give us your.
Well, I think it explained why the Western European and United States governments are so wedded to the Ukraine war, and they're willing to throw untold billions worth of dollars at what is obviously a military quagmire at this point, something that most people would have understood was never going to be resolved militarily unless they were really going to risk nuclear war with Russia, which apparently they're willing to do. Because this isn't really about a military victory. This isn't necessarily just a war that is fought on the battlefield at this point. What this event showed is how the West, and pretty much through USAID, because what USAID is the front that gives cover to the private-public partnership of Western imperial policy. So USAID goes in to countries and gives them US taxpayer money. Their slogan is actually "From the American People." I think I saw that for the first time at this event because it was under their logo. I was like, I don't even think the American people know that they're giving people anything through USAID. But so USAID gives the US taxpayer money to nominally non-government NGOs in foreign countries, or in some cases just directly to the government. And then in a lot of cases, what that means is that those funds have to then directly be used in order to buy Western technology. Or, I mean, in Ukraine's case, Samantha Power actually just held a conference in Ukraine, in Kiev, with the leaders of Western tech and finance. And she was basically saying Ukraine is going through a really hard time right now, but it's all going to pay off when we get the future that we're planning here. And you can see that future through the Diia app and through everything they discussed at this event. And by the way, the CEO or high-level figures from BlackRock and Visa and all the major corporate vultures were in Kiev for that conference. So it's a little bit disgusting to think that these people are already there, ready to prey on the carcass of Ukraine while their men of Ukraine are still dying, basically for nothing at this point. So it's really twisted. And this app and the event showed that, and they said it explicitly, that they plan to make Ukraine into a vision of the future of what they want for all of us, which is remote work and learning. Tech innovation is basically the main industry. So you just get all these investments from financial institutions to create a bunch of technology that no one really needs. They said Ukraine will be the first cashless society and be reliant on a central bank digital currency by 2030. And I mean, we can play the full clip of that. I think Max can if he wants. But basically, as Max described, all of this falls under the category of what the Davos elite describe as the fourth industrial revolution, and what they see as the future that we all should live under, including here in the United States. They think we should be living in 15-minute cities where we can access everything we need and only be plugged into some electrical grid. We don't really get gas cars anymore. They never talk about necessarily how they're going to live, Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab, but they definitely are explicitly telling us that they don't expect us to own anything, definitely not have homes or even really families in the future. And that is what they are rolling out and testing already in Ukraine. They had began talking about this app in 2019, and they rolled it out as a result of the war. And something else.
Well, it was actually rolled out, Anya, before the war, and we'll play the clip by
people.
Visa's
I don't think people were using it on the same.
People were using it, but not on the same scale. But it was first used with Visa technology to incent, as Visa's chairman Al Kelly said at the event, in order to basically pay Ukrainians to take the mRNA COVID vaccine.
Yeah, we don't even know where they got that money.
And so the question is, were U.S. taxpayers and EU taxpayers basically having their money raked out of their pockets to bribe Ukrainians to take experimental COVID injections? But just the whole point that you're making here is that the fourth industrial revolution is being tested in a laboratory where citizens have the least power, and then it's being exported to other countries where citizens have little power to push back. As they announced at this event, Zambia and Colombia are going to be trying the Diia app, as well as Zanzibar. But let's look at, and when we talk about
Diia app, but their own USAID partnership to create a similar app. I think Diia is just Ukraine, but
we can look at how this app is being used actually to pit citizens against each other, and as a literal weapon, as Samantha Power said. Here's something I filmed that was so shocking during this presentation. which shows how the app is actually being used, encourages people to snitch in Ukraine on their neighbors.
4 bonds aimed at rebuilding the liberated and soon-to-be deoccupied Ukrainian cities. State mortgage. Military, medics, teachers, and scientists can apply for the state mortgage right in the app. E-Enemy, a chatbot that helps any citizen safely transfer info about the location of Russian troops, names of collaborators, and enemy movements to the armed forces. About the location of Russian
One more
troops,
time.
names of collaborators, and enemy movements to the armed forces. Numerous attacks of Russian army destroyed a number of TV towers. To provide Ukrainians with uninterrupted access to information, we launched Diia Radio and Diia TV, so that even under blackouts, millions could feel present. And added the in-app Army of Drones game to help Ukrainians both distract and donate to the common purpose. Has the enemy launched cyber attacks on Ukraine? Of course they have, and they failed. Even when the world is falling apart, our main task is to protect the people. Together, we can build a stronger one.
So we've seen the video of accused collaborators being thrown in mass graves by members of the Azov battalion. We've seen mayors killed who are accused of being collaborators in Ukraine. We've seen Ukrainian officials cheer on these assassinations, and we've seen all of the major political opposition parties in Ukraine be banned. With its
Well, the Ukrainian government banned them, not just they weren't just being like somebody banned them. The Ukrainian government that we fund and pay for banned them.
Right. So this app takes on a very dark quality and while you're bored, if you're bored at all, you can play the Army of Drones game. You can pretend to be a drone going to assassinate Putin. Brought to you by Visa and Google.
They called it the Army of Drones because, as we've covered at the Grayzone with Alex Rubinstein just recently, the Army of Drones is an official initiative that the Ukrainian government has in place right now, where if you can actually pull up the web page and maybe show people, Max, or pull up Alex's article. The Ukrainian government is openly fundraising in order to purchase drones. And they even ask people or foreign governments to donate actual drones. They call them dronations instead of donations on the website. They enlisted actor Mark Hamill from Star Wars.
Mark Hamill.
Yeah. I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, to be honest.
Well, he's kind of like, 30 years ago, 40 years ago,
but anyway, so they are trying to, and they call this their Army of Drones campaign. And these are the drones that we can suspect were used not only in the attack on the Kremlin earlier this month, but also in an earlier assassination attempt on Putin, on Russian President Vladimir Putin's life. And there have been hundreds of incursions into Russian territory over the border there with Ukraine of these drones, according to Russia. And, the BBC has done articles pumping up this Army of Drones campaign. There's no secret that it's going on, but then they kind of are coy when an actual attack takes place in Russia and pretend like, oh, it's a false flag from Putin. So I think a lot of people are evolved enough to see what's going on there. And yeah,
back to the Diia app. I mean, they're saying that the drone strikes, you can essentially call in a drone strike by reporting enemy locations to the Ukrainian military with this app, in which you also maintain your vaccination status, your ID card, and your
banking
and your banking info, and that Visa itself maintains the server.
I believe also that under digital or remote education, that students would, I imagine, also be engaging with their schooling through Diia. It's pretty much just supposed to be, they sell it as convenience, just like they did during COVID-19. All these people that were like, oh, I wish that we could just have a digital ID so that it would be so easy to go through airports. That's how they get you to buy into basically the digitization of everything that makes us human, everything that is a part of our daily life. They are openly saying they just want to put it in one app. They don't even want you to have cash anymore. And then it's like such a great, cool thing. You're not supposed to really question it or have any concerns about digital surveillance whatsoever. And the last point that I would just make in that regard is that as they were pumping up this app and giving their spiel and pitch at the event we attended, and they said they were boasting of how the digital ID made it very easy to track citizens and ease their travel, I think is how they spun it. But then I was thinking, wait, in a country that is conscripting all of its men to fight in a war, regardless of whether or not they actually believe in it or want to sacrifice their lives because they know that's what they're going to do if they get sent to war. What does that mean if they can control and monitor every citizen through their phone that way? And that, you can't just cross over a border with your passport anymore. You're required to pass with this phone that is your ID. I mean, it seems like it would really assist in the Ukrainian government's effort to force every single male in the country to die on the front line.
Or to be killed because they're suspected collaborators. But we've all seen the video, or we've reported on these videos of young or military age Ukrainian men being rounded up and press ganged on the street, thrown into vans and taken to the front lines, taken to Bakhmut. If you sign up for the Diia app, presumably you're using geolocation. And while Mikhailo Fedorov, the young 32-year-old Yale-trained minister of digital transformation who previously engaged in a $60 million partnership with the crypto scam known as FTX, said from the stage at Warner Theater, or claimed from the stage, all the data, that it does not store your data. But I don't believe that when it's not on a blockchain and it's being maintained by Google and Visa and USAID put up all the money for it. And then we also have the reality of Diia as it relates to the U.S. taxpayer. Okay, $25 million was put up by USAID for Diia, but as Samantha Power, the director of USAID, claimed, were it not for Diia, $15 billion of our money would not have gone to Ukraine to literally pay public workers. I mean, this was a shocking comment that Samantha Power volunteered. She went out of her way to make this statement.
One of the things that Congress has given USAID since this full-scale invasion began is an unprecedented amount of money in direct budget support, which sounds kind of obvious. Of course, we would do that. We want to stand with Ukraine, but it's totally unprecedented, this kind of scale of investment. And we're talking along the lines of about $15 billion in a sense, cash to the Ukrainian government, which was famously corrupt, in past years, and still has work, as you noted, to do on corruption today. I don't know if we could have gotten that money out of Congress if not for Diia. Because what Diia allows us to do is that direct budget support goes, yes, to the Ukrainian government, but then it goes to pay teachers, to pay healthcare workers, to pay first responders. And there's a digital trail. It's not, some official deciding this or that. It actually is going directly into the bank accounts in a manner that it would have been untraceable in a prior regime.
Well, so she's saying it's traceable. The whole point is it's traceable. So they don't have privacy, but we're directly paying teachers in Ukraine, while teachers in LA just had to go on strike for better wages. We're paying healthcare workers, Anya.
It was very tricky marketing that she delivered there, because obviously the Ukrainian government is so corrupt that not even Samantha Power or anybody else in Washington can deny that corruption was a major issue in the country over the last several years. And so part of how they're branding the Diia app is that it will combat corruption by making it impossible. If all exchanges and all government contracts and all documents and any permit that you need to get to build or anything is centralized in this app, controlled or under the authority of the government in Kiev, then corruption is impossible because the bureaucrats and people in charge can monitor what's going on. That doesn't actually help you if the state is the mafia that's responsible for the corruption. The Ukrainian state is not actually some civic institution that is there representing the interests of the Ukrainian people according to a social contract or sense of government obligation. It is made up of the very financial elite, pretty much, that have ties to the West and who are driving this war and had also pillaged the country ever since 2014. And through the privatization schemes and everything that came in after the Maidan coup, those are the people responsible for the corruption. I mean, Zelensky, we all know he's just an actor. He's just a comedian. His main funder, Kolomoisky, is the Ukrainian banker who, I mean, people don't really maybe understand this. The reason Kolomoisky is so hated in Ukraine is because he was overseeing the bank in Ukraine where average Ukrainians had stored their money for years. And then one day it just didn't exist. And people talk about that maybe happening here in the United States or in Europe sometime soon, but it's already something that they've shown can happen in Ukraine. Then after everybody was suddenly poor and impoverished, then they came in with this liberalization scheme and agenda promising them work through Western investment and construction, which they're going to do also after, or they would like to, after this war is over and Ukraine's destroyed.
The partnership with BlackRock.
Right. But if Kolomoisky is behind the government, essentially, people know that.
He's literally a governor of Dnipro, of one of the major provinces in Ukraine.
But if that's your government, then how is having a centralized app where everything is managed by that government actually going to stop corruption? What it's really doing is taking away the sovereignty of the people and selling it to them. They don't really have a choice in Ukraine, really, but they are at least branding it to us as, oh, the Ukrainians need this convenience and it's going to protect them from civic corruption. And they would like to convince us in the West also that accepting such an app would do the same. But we also know that our government is run by the mafia that is screwing all of us anyway. So they were complaining at that event. Kara Swisher, the editor-in-chief of New York Magazine, was complaining that Americans specifically would never accept something like this, which I hope is true. But COVID did tell us, or at least told me, that I can never be so sure, because when people get these existential fear senses in their bodies, they might agree to anything.
Yeah, that's a great point. And here is Kara Swisher introducing Zelensky's presentation of Diia, which hammers home the point that the Davos-centric Fourth Industrial Revolution arrived in Ukraine with Zelensky's election. He was advised by so many American advisors, including the now infamous Nina Jankowicz. So here's journalistic gun for hire Kara Swisher introducing Zelensky.
So without further ado, first a video from President Zelensky.
Творіння Джобса, Apple, iPhone. І це його серце. І воно б'ється з кожним вібро під час дзвінка або під час SMS.
I mean, it's interesting here, just to cut in. He's, first of all, he's humanizing the iPhone and describing it as kind of the heartbeat of a nation because it beats with every vibration. This is prior to 2022. Zelensky was speaking at the Stanford Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies, which is a major spook fest. It's where Obama announced the Obama Foundation's counter disinformation plan.
а в ньому наше українське творіння «Держава у смартфоні».
Мільйони
In
українців
a
щоденно
smartphone.
користуються нашим державним
Millions of
сервісом
Ukrainians
Diia.
use our
Це
state
більше
platform every
100
day to more
державних
than
послуг без
100 public
контакту з
services
чиновниками,
without
цифровий
needing
паспорт, відкриття
digital
рахунків,
passport,
сплата
bank accounts,
штрафів,
fines,
податків, отримання
taxes,
державної допомоги,
state aid,
збір коштів на допомогу
army funds.
армії. Все це українська дія. Україна не випадково стала одним із глобальних лідерів в цифровізації публічних послуг
digitizing
і
public services
соціальних
and social
відносин.
relations.
Це прямий
This
наслідок
is an
того,
outcome of what we're
на що
capable
ми
of.
здатні. Сміливість і освіта, здатність боротися за свої інтереси і знайти найзручніший
And to
шлях.
find the most
Шлях,
convenient
щоб
way.
реалізувати.
So you get the point. But this also really highlights what Zelensky was about. Again, many of those presentations that Zelensky was making about Diia took place before the war. Ukraine was always, with his election, intended to be engine or hub or a hub of the Great Reset. Anya, anything else to add about the Diia event in Washington, or your thoughts on where this is going?
I don't think it's going anywhere positive for Ukraine. It seems, and this is what I said in my tweet about the event, that Ukraine has already been sacrificed on the altar of Western finance and technology. They are not fighting this war in Ukraine because they believe Ukraine can win. I mean, the West, the United Kingdom, the United States, and its subservient European allies is waging this war not because they believe Ukraine can win militarily, but because they believe Ukraine can be destroyed, and that then they will have the chance to rebuild it according to their vision of the future, which is what they want to ultimately bring to us. And this is according to the statements that they make themselves. So we should look at Ukraine immediately as a tragedy that is a human tragedy, and something that the only conversation we should be having about it is to say that there needs to be a peace and a negotiated solution. In the entire 2 hours that these people spoke in Washington, D.C., there was not one mention of how to actually stop the death and destruction in Ukraine. So that should tell you already a lot about how these people think. And aside from the immediate demand that we should all have, which is to end this war, end the suffering of, more than anyone, the Ukrainian people, that would be real Ukraine solidarity. But then after that, we should step back and consider, what does everything that's going on in Ukraine tell us about what could become our own future, or what the people running our countries, and really the Western transatlantic elite, what their agenda is for all of us? And are we poised to actually confront it? Do we even totally understand it? I think the COVID experience helped many of us, including, I think, you and me, Max, and a lot of our friends, understand the full scope of this agenda. It's not just the CIA doing regime change wars. That's one part of a global agenda that our elite have, and they're going to turn this on us. They're going to try and convince you and me and everybody else that we should have a Diia style app, and maybe it will save us from climate change. I think that's the one existential fear that they have already said pretty much they will rely on to unveil the fourth industrial revolution to the West. But we need to be vigilant and very critical of what's going on, because I don't know how much time we have to really oppose it, especially when we consider all the rapid advancements going on in AI technology and just what they openly say, and the fact that they're willing to march us to nuclear war. So we should draw lessons from this about what it means for our own societies.
Great point. I mean, we're talking about disaster capitalism in Ukraine being but the innovations being exported around the world in the era of AI. And Elon Musk, who has been in the past a supporter of transhumanism and AI, has actually said there needs to be a pause on AI technology because of the danger that it poses to humanity. Kara Swisher even came out and joked that AI would destroy humanity. But then you have Eric Schmidt in charge of the Pentagon's fourth offset, Eric Schmidt of Google, declaring that no, we have to keep AI full steam ahead because of the great power competition with China. So Anya is absolutely right. I think this is the key challenge of our time, and it's happening against the tableau of empire